The photographer said it the same way he said it every year. "Everyone gather, please, we're losing the light." And every year my mother arranged us. She knew exactly where she wanted each person. Petra at the center, my Aunt Claire to the left, my uncle and his wife filling the right side, the cousins distributed around them like punctuation. She moved through it quickly, the way someone moves through a task they have done so many times it no longer requires thought. And every year I step to the side. Welcome back to channel_name, where what gets left out of the frame says more than what stays in. My name is Nora Calloway. I want to tell you about 14 years of family photographs, and about a joint account my mother needed me to sign off on, and about what I had in my bag the afternoon she finally asked. I had lived in Seattle for 9 years when the last reunion happened. I worked as an urban planner for the city, in the department that handled long-range land use, the kind of work that required patience with slow-moving systems and the ability to hold a great deal of information in careful order. I was good at both of those things. I had been good at them my whole life, long before I found a job that paid me for it. My mother, Vivian, lived in Bellingham, in the house where Petra and I had grown up, a 2-story craftsman on a street that still had old-growth maples, the kind of neighborhood that had stayed the same for 40 years because the people in it preferred it that way. My mother was one of those people. She had lived in that house for 31 years. She knew every neighbor by name. She organized the block's annual cleanup and the neighborhood association's holiday card, and the informal phone tree that activated whenever someone needed meals delivered or a driveway shoveled. She was very good at organizing things. Petra was 4 years younger than me and had moved back to Bellingham 6 years ago, after a marriage that lasted 14 months ended without drama or particular explanation. She lived 12 minutes from my mother, in a rental house on a quieter street, and she worked part-time at a garden center and part-time at a pottery studio that sold its pieces online. She was not struggling, exactly. She was simply in the way that some people are, in a state of not quite landing, where the next thing is always close but never fully arrived.
My mother did not see it that way.
My mother saw Petra as the daughter who had come home, and she valued that in a way that was not complicated by whether coming home was a choice or a default. What mattered to Vivian was proximity and need, and Petra provided both, and I provided neither, which was fine with me, and which my mother had also decided, without apparent discussion, was fine. The photograph tradition had started the year my grandmother died, which was the year I was 22. My grandmother had kept albums, real ones, with sticky pages and plastic overlays, organized by year and labeled in her handwriting. When she died, my mother inherited the albums and the habit, and she began organizing a family photograph each year at the summer reunion, professional, printed, framed. She had a photographer she used every year, a man named Douglas who drove up from Anacortes and charged $340 for the session and did very clean, competent work. The first year, I was in the photograph. I was in the second year's photograph too, and the third. I was standing slightly to the side in those, not excluded, just at the edge, the way you end up at the edge when you are the taller one, and the family's natural arrangement puts the shorter people at the center. I did not think about it much in those years. It was a photograph. The fourth year was the year my mother said for the first time, "Nora, stand to the side, so we can see Petra better. She's got the dark blouse on." I stepped to the side. Douglas took the photograph. I was not in it, not really. Half of my shoulder was visible in the far left edge of the frame, cropped so close that you could not have identified it as mine without prior knowledge. The fifth year, she said it before I had positioned myself at all. "Stand to the side, Nora." The same tone she used to say past the salt or the mail came. Informational. Already decided. By the sixth year, I simply stepped aside before she said anything, because I had learned to read the arrangement before it was announced. I let it sit. I told myself it was a photograph. The reveal object arrived in the conversation later, not that day, but 3 years into the photograph tradition, during a phone call about my grandmother's property. My grandmother had owned a small parcel of land outside Sedro-Woolley, 6 acres, timber use designation, no structures, not particularly valuable in any immediate sense, but not without value either. When she died, it had passed to my mother as the sole heir. My mother had done nothing with it for 2 years, and then she had called me one Sunday evening and told me she was thinking about setting up a joint account to hold the proceeds if they ever sold it, so that the money could be managed cleanly for the family's use. "I'd like to put both your names on it," she said, meaning mine and Petra's. "But the bank needs a primary account holder and a co-signing party. I was thinking you, since you're the older one and you're better with paperwork." "What would the account be used for?" I said. "Just to hold whatever comes in from the property," she said. "If we lease the timber rights, if we ever sell, it would just sit there until we needed it." "Okay," I said. "Send me the paperwork." She sent it the following week. I read it carefully. It was a standard joint account authorization with a right of survivorship clause and a secondary signatory provision. My name was listed as primary. Petra's name was not on it at all.
I called my mother about that.
"Oh, I decided to simplify it," she said. "Just you and me. It's easier." I looked at the form. "Okay," I said. I signed and returned it. That was the joint account. I kept a copy of the authorization in a folder in my filing cabinet, which was where I kept copies of things, because I was someone who kept copies of things. I did not think about the account much after that. It sat. Years passed. The property sat too, undeveloped, untimbered, taxed at agricultural rates, worth approximately $47,000 on the current market if you found the right buyer, which my mother had never tried to do. Until this past spring, when she called me about it again. What I had built over 14 years was a very complete record of a very simple pattern. Not intentionally, at first. I kept things because I kept things, files, emails, receipts, the kind of paper trail that accumulates when you are a person who works in city planning and has learned that undocumented decisions become someone else's version of events. I had applied that habit to my personal life without deciding to, the way you apply habits you develop in one domain to every domain eventually. The photo tradition was documented because I had the annual reunion photographs, or rather because I did not have them. I had one framed copy on my mother's living room wall from the 3rd year when I was still in the frame. After that, nothing. My mother gave Petra a framed copy each year and sent one to our Aunt Claire and kept one on the living room shelf in a rotating frame that she updated annually. I was not in any of them after year 3. I had never asked for a copy. My mother had never offered one. This, I understood, was its own kind of documentation. The labor of the years between was harder to name, but not hard to recall. It was not dramatic labor, not the kind that comes with crisis or emergency. It was the ordinary maintenance kind, the kind that happens when you are the daughter, who lives 2 hours away and has a stable income, and is good at paperwork. It was the time my mother's roof needed inspection after the big windstorm in November of 2017, and she called me because she didn't know who to call, and I found a contractor through the city's licensed vendor list and coordinated 3 estimates over 2 weeks of phone calls and made the recommendation, and she went with a second estimate, $8,340, which she paid herself. I did not pay for the roof, but I did every logistical thing that made the roof happen. It was the time Petra's car registration lapsed, and she was pulled over, and my mother called me from the roadside because Petra was upset and needed someone to talk her through what to do, and I walked Petra through the DMV's process while I was eating lunch at my desk, and afterward my mother said, "You're so good in a crisis, Nora," in the voice she used when she meant it as a fact about my nature rather than a compliment about a specific action. It was the time the family reunion, which I organized every 3rd year, rotating with my Aunt Claire, required a venue, and I booked the lodge on Orcas Island 14 months in advance because the good dates go fast, and paid the deposit of $1,875 on my card, and was reimbursed by my Aunt Claire 6 weeks later as agreed, and was not reimbursed by my mother for her share, $625, because when I mentioned it she said she'd get it to me and then didn't, and I did not mention it again. It was the year I turned 31 and my mother threw a small birthday gathering for Petra in the same month as my own birthday, 2 weeks apart, and I received a phone call and a card with a gift card to a bookstore inside, and Petra received a dinner with 12 people at a restaurant on the water, and a weekend trip to Victoria that my mother had planned and partially funded. I did not feel wronged by any of this in a way I could have pointed to directly. Each thing was small. Each thing had an explanation. Petra needed more. Petra was going through something. Petra was right there. and I was 2 hours away and capable. Always capable. I let it sit. I let each thing sit until it was settled, and then I let the next thing come, and I sat that too, until sitting had become so habitual that I had stopped noticing I was doing it. The flashback I returned to most, in the days before the reunion, was the photograph from the third year. I had been wearing a blue dress. I remembered it specifically because I had bought it for the occasion. Not an extravagant dress, a cotton wrap dress from a shop on Capitol Hill that I had gone to on a Saturday afternoon, and tried on 4 things before settling on the blue. It was the first time I had thought about what to wear to the reunion photograph in a way that went beyond something presentable, which told me something about where I was in that year, hopeful, maybe in a way I had not yet learned to be more careful with. In the photograph, I am standing between my Aunt Claire and my mother. Petra is at the center, in white. Douglas had used a wide aperture, and the background was very softly blurred, and the light was the kind of Pacific Northwest summer light that is almost too clear, that makes skin look very precise. I look like myself in it. I look like I belong there. My mother printed that one and framed it, and for 1 year it sat on the living room shelf. The following summer, Douglas came again, and a new photograph took its place. I do not know what happened to the old one. I never asked. What I had kept instead were the financial records. Not because I had planned to use them, or, at least, not consciously. But the joint account authorization was in my filing cabinet, and next to it, over the years, I had placed the email thread about the property's assessed value, the tax statement my mother had forwarded asking if I could make sense of it, the letter from the county assessor about the timber use designation that I had translated into plain language for her and sent back with annotations. And then, 3 months before the reunion, the email from a timber broker my mother had apparently contacted without telling me, asking for my signature as the primary account holder to authorize an assessment of the property's timber value. I had signed the original joint account authorization. I was on the deed as a secondary interest holder, something I had not fully understood when I signed the paperwork 6 years ago, and which I had only confirmed when I pulled the county property records 8 weeks before the reunion, after the broker's email arrived. I was not sure my mother knew that either. I pulled the records on a Tuesday evening in my home office in Seattle, with the window open to the sound of the neighborhood, kids on the street below, someone mowing, the distant sound of a ferry horn from the water. I looked at the property records for a long time. Then I printed them. I put them in the folder with the joint account authorization and the assessor's letter and the broker's email. I closed the folder. I put it in my bag. I let it sit until the reunion. The Orcas Island Lodge sat on a cleared rise above a stand of Douglas fir, with a wide deck facing west and a view of the channel in the afternoon light. I had booked it 14 months earlier, as I said, and it was as good as I had expected, solid, simply furnished, the kind of place built to hold families without demanding anything of them. 31 people came this year. My mother arrived the evening before with Petra, in Petra's car, which surprised me because the drive from Bellingham to the ferry terminal was not short, and my mother usually preferred her own vehicle. They had stopped somewhere on the way and brought food, a cooler of things, cheese and fruit, and things for the first evening. My mother set them out on the kitchen island with the focused efficiency of someone who knew exactly how she wanted the evening to begin. Nora. She hugged me when she came through the door. She smelled like the drive, a mix of the ferry and the cooler, and something floral. You've done a beautiful job with this. It's a nice space, I said. It really is. She looked around the main room approvingly. Petra, doesn't this remind you of that place near Hood Canal? Petra set down the cooler and looked around. A little, she said. The windows are better here. That was the first evening. Food and wine on the deck, and the light going long across the water, and the sound of the family filling a space the way families do, the particular ambient noise of people who share a history arranging themselves around each other. I sat on the edge of the deck with my cousin's husband and talked about nothing much. I had the folder in my bag, which I had left inside. Douglas arrived Saturday morning. He was the same man he had always been, a little heavier than when he'd started coming to these events, quieter than most photographers, with a deliberate way of setting up that suggested he had learned not to rush families. He set up near the west-facing railing of the deck, with the channel behind and the morning light coming in at the angle he wanted. He spent 20 minutes adjusting. My mother began her arrangement. She moved through it the way she always moved through it, my Aunt Claire to the left, my uncle and his wife filling the right, the cousins sorted by height. Petra she placed at the center. Petra was wearing a pale yellow blouse, and my mother touched her shoulder lightly as she positioned her, a small adjustment, the kind of touch that looked like affection but was also instruction. I was standing near the railing, slightly behind the group. I had been watching the arrangement happen with the particular attention you develop when you have watched the same arrangement for 14 years. Nora, my mother said, not looking at me, still focused on the positioning of my Aunt Claire's shoulder. Stand to the side, sweetheart. We're trying to keep the railing clear. The railing was clear. There was nothing on the railing. I looked at the channel. The morning light on the water was very flat and bright, the kind that makes you squint without deciding to. A ferry was moving in the middle distance, white against gray water. I did not step aside. It was not a dramatic thing, not a planted stance, not a refusal with any visible quality of refusal. I simply did not move. I stood where I was, near the railing, and looked at the channel, and waited. My mother turned. She looked at where I was standing. Nora, she said again, the same tone, the informational tone. I'm fine here, I said. A small silence. Douglas was adjusting his lens. My Aunt Claire had turned slightly to see what was happening. Petra was looking at the water. The railing is going to be in the shot, my mother said. Douglas can adjust the angle, I said. Another silence. My mother looked at Douglas. Douglas looked at the group, then at the railing, then made a small shrug that meant he could accommodate either arrangement. It's fine, my mother said finally, in the voice she used when something was not fine but proceeding. Come in a little. Everyone together. I moved in.
Not to the side, in.
Douglas took the photograph. I do not know yet what it looks like. We had not gotten the proofs back by the time my mother called me 4 days later, from her house in Bellingham, and asked if I could meet her at her bank branch in Seattle that week to sign some paperwork related to the joint account. The timber broker needs a signature from the primary account holder, she said. It's just a formality. I looked at the window of my office. The Seattle afternoon outside was the kind that comes in late August, cloud cover that diffuses the light into something even and total, no shadows, everything its own exact color. I'll come Tuesday, I said. I have something I'd like to show you first. A pause. Show me, she said. Just some paperwork, I said. Nothing complicated. I'll see you Tuesday. I ended the call. I sat at my desk for a moment. Then I opened my bag and checked that the folder was still there, which I already knew. The ferry horn from the water, the same sound I had heard the night I pulled the property records, came through the open window. I listened to it for a moment, and then I went back to work. The bank branch my mother used was on a corner in the Fremont neighborhood, a mid-sized building with glass doors and a small parking lot that was always slightly too full. I had been inside it once before, years ago, when I had notarized something for my mother as a favor, and the nearest notary to my apartment had been this branch. I remembered the carpet being a particular shade of blue-gray that was trying to be calming, and mostly succeeded. Tuesday came overcast, which was ordinary for Seattle in late August. I took the bus because parking in Fremont at midday was not worth the effort, and I sat by the window and watched the neighborhoods change, Capitol Hill to Eastlake to the bridge, and then down into Fremont with its murals and its Saturday market stalls folded up for the week. I had the folder in my bag. I had looked through it again the previous evening, not because I needed to review it, but because I wanted to be sure of the order. The property records were on top. Below them, the joint account authorization from 6 years ago, my signature on the third page. Below that, the tax statements my mother had forwarded over the years with questions I had answered. Below that, the county assessor's letter and my annotated translation of it. At the bottom, the timber broker's email, printed, with the date visible in the header. I put them back in order and closed the folder and left it on my desk overnight. In the morning I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window and watched the street below. A woman was walking a dog, a large one, some kind of setter, moving with the particular focused energy of a dog that had been waiting all morning for exactly this. The woman was on her phone. The dog was not interested in the phone. I thought about the blue dress. I thought about the year I had bought it on a Saturday afternoon, and thought about what I wanted to look like in the photograph, and how that kind of hoping had gradually, over the years that followed, become something quieter. Not absent, quieter. The way a sound doesn't disappear but changes frequency until you stop registering it as sound and start registering it as background. I thought about the morning on the Orcas Island deck when I had not stepped aside, and Douglas had adjusted his angle, and the photograph had been taken with me in it. I did not know what I looked like in that photograph. I knew where I had been standing, near the railing, the channel behind, the morning light coming flat off the water. I knew I had been there. That was the thing I kept returning to, standing at my kitchen window with my coffee going cooler. Not the 14 years of being outside the frame. The morning I had simply stayed where I was. I had stayed where I was because I had the folder. Because I knew what was in the folder and what it meant, and because knowing that had changed the geometry of the arrangement in a way my mother did not yet understand. I was not going to the bank to refuse to sign. I had not decided that yet. Or rather, I had decided that what I signed or did not sign would depend on the conversation, and the conversation had not happened yet. What I had decided was that the conversation was going to be different from the ones we had been having. I washed my coffee cup. I put on my jacket. I picked up my bag with the folder in it, and I checked that the folder was there, and I went out. The bank was quieter than I expected for a Tuesday midday. My mother was already there when I arrived. She was sitting in one of the chairs near the side wall. Not at a desk, just waiting. She was wearing a cardigan I recognized, dark green, the one she wore when she was doing practical errands. She stood when she saw me. Nora. She came toward me. She hugged me with the efficiency of a person completing a greeting. Thank you for coming into the city. I know it's out of your way. It's fine, I said. I work nearby. Of course you do. She looked around the branch. I asked if we could use one of the conference rooms. They said yes. It's just a small one. Before we go in, I said, can we sit for a minute? She looked at me. Something shifted in her attention, not alarm, more the quality of careful focus she brought to things that required it. Of course, she said. We sat in the chairs near the side wall. My bag was on the floor beside my chair. I left it there for a moment. The broker's email, I said. The one asking for my signature. Yes, she said. It's very straightforward. He just needs authorization to conduct the timber assessment. It doesn't obligate us to anything. I know what it is, I said. I read it carefully. I also pulled the county property records. She was looking at me steadily. All right, she said. I want to show you something, I said. And then I want to talk, and then we can go into the conference room. Nora. It won't take long, I said. I reached into my bag. I took out the folder. I laid it flat on the low table between our chairs. I opened it to the first page, the county property records printed on 2 sheets, and I took them out and laid them flat, unfolded, on top of the closed folder. These are the property records for the Cedro-Woolley parcel, I said, from the county assessor's online database. I pulled them 3 weeks ago. She looked at the pages. She leaned forward slightly. I know what the property records are, she said. Then you know that my name is on the deed, I said. As a secondary interest holder. Not just on the account, on the deed. A pause. She looked at the pages more carefully. That was part of the original paperwork, she said. When we set up the account, the bank required. Mom. I kept my voice level. I'm not sure you knew that. I'm also not sure I fully understood it when I signed. But it's there, and it matters, because it means any action on the property, including authorizing a timber assessment that could lead to a lease or a sale, requires my informed consent. Not just my signature on a broker form. She sat back. She looked at me. You make it sound like I was trying to hide something, she said. I don't think you were trying to hide it, I said. I think it happened the way a lot of things between us happen, quickly, practically, with the assumption that I would handle whatever needed handling and not require much explanation in return. The branch was quiet around us. Someone at the teller window was counting bills. The carpet was the blue-gray I remembered. That's not fair, she said. Which part? I said. She was quiet for a moment. I reached back into the folder. I took out the joint account authorization, the original, 6 years old, my signature on the 3rd page, and laid it flat beside the property records. I signed this in good faith, I said. I read it, and I signed it, and I filed a copy. What I didn't fully register at the time was the deed provision. What I also didn't say at the time, and I should have, was that I'd like to understand what I'm signing before I sign it. You've always been fine with helping, she said. You've never. I know, I said. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. I've been fine with it in the way that you've always arranged me to be fine with it. Stand to the side, Nora. You're the capable one. You always are. She looked at the table. The property records were very precise on the white surface, the county seal, the parcel number, the names listed in the interest holder section. I was at the Orcas reunion, she said after a moment. I've been at every reunion. You have, I said. And I've been in one of the photographs. A long silence. The teller window sound stopped. The branch was very quiet. I didn't realize, she said, that you felt excluded. I know you didn't, I said. That's the thing I needed you to understand. You've been arranging things for a long time without realizing what the arrangement looked like for my side. The photographs are one version of it. This, I touched the folder, is another. She looked at the folder. Stand to the side, she said, quietly, her own words, from the deck, from every year before the deck. That's what you're telling me. That's what I've been doing. Yes, I said. And you've been keeping records, she said. I keep records of everything, I said. I always have. It's just that this time I brought them. Another silence. She picked up the property records, carefully with both hands, the way you handle something you are reconsidering, and looked at them. What do you want to happen? She said. I want to go into that conference room, I said, and I want the broker's form in front of us, and I want to go through it together, the whole thing, not just the signature page. And I want us to agree on what we're authorizing and what we're not, and what happens to any proceeds if this ever goes to sale. In writing. Before I sign anything. She set the property records back on the table. That's reasonable, she said. It came out with a slight resistance, the way something comes out when it is true, but being admitted for the first time. I know it is, I said. I'm not trying to cut you out, she said. I want you to know that. I do know that, I said. That's why I came. If I thought you were trying to cut me out, I would have sent a letter from a property attorney and saved us both the trip. Something in her face shifted, not quite a smile, but adjacent to one. The careful focus relaxing by a degree. You would have, she said. I would have, I said. I gathered the pages from the table, put them back in the folder in order, and closed it. Let's go in, I said. I picked up my bag. I stood. She stood too, smoothing the front of the dark green cardigan. She looked at me for a moment, the full-length look that mothers give daughters when they are seeing something they had not been paying attention to. You look like your grandmother, she said. When you do that. When you gather things up. She kept records too, I said. She did. My mother said. She really did. We walked toward the conference room side by side, and I held the door and we went in. 3 things happened after that Tuesday. The first, the broker's form. We went through it page by page in the conference room with a branch manager who was professionally neutral and very good at not reacting to the conversation happening around the paperwork. The form authorized a preliminary timber assessment only, no lease, no sale, no further commitment. I signed it. I also asked the branch manager to note in the account file that any future authorizations above a threshold we named, $5,000, required both account holders to sign in person, not electronically. She said she could do that. And she did. The second, the photographs. My mother had Douglas's contact information and she called him that week and asked him to send the digital files from the Orcas reunion. She texted me when they arrived. The photo from Saturday morning showed the group on the deck, the channel behind, the morning light flat and bright off the water, Petra in the pale yellow blouse at the center, the cousins arranged around her, and me near the railing on the left side. Present. In the frame. Looking at something slightly off camera, which turned out to be the ferry in the middle distance. My mother had a print made. She sent it to me without a note, just the print in a cardboard mailer, sized for an 8x10 frame. I framed it. The third, the property. The timber assessment came back 6 weeks later. The parcel had modest but workable timber value, estimated at $31,400 for a 5-year lease of the harvestable section. My mother and I talked about it on the phone for 20 minutes, going through the numbers together, which was a different kind of conversation than the ones we had been having. We agreed to take 2 weeks to think about it before responding to the broker. That was where it stood when I sat down to tell you this story. The folder is still in my bag. I have not moved it back to the filing cabinet. I'm not sure why, maybe because it is useful to have it there, not as a threat, but as a reminder of what it means to know what you're carrying. What I know now that I did not know 14 years ago is that being capable is not the same as being available for unlimited arrangement. I am still the person who reads things carefully and keeps copies and shows up organized. I am still good at paperwork. What is different is that I know where the line is between the things I choose to carry and the things that have been handed to me without discussion, and I know now that I am allowed to set some of them down, which is not the same as walking away. The reunion photograph is on my desk at home, in the 8x10 frame. The channel in it is very flat and bright. The fairy is almost out of the frame on the right side, just a smear of white against the gray water. I am near the railing looking at it, not at the camera, not at my mother, not at Petra in the yellow blouse at the center. I am looking at the thing that was moving, which was also still there, which was also worth watching. If this story stayed with you, if something in Nora's folder, or the deck on Orcas Island, or the photograph arriving in a cardboard mailer without a note found you somewhere, share it with someone who might need to hear it. That is how these stories find the people they are for. I will see you in the next one.